So you've got a Steam Deck and you're looking for some game recommendations. I've already done 3 of these videos talking about 5 games that I think are worth picking up on Steam Deck, so once you've finished here, go and check those out if you're looking for some more recommendations. All of the gameplay footage that you're going to see is recorded on Steam Deck, so you can see for yourself just how well these games run. Let's get started. So we're starting with another Crab's Treasure, and it's not too often that I buy a game so close to release, but this one I just thought looked like a great combination of unique, wacky, funny, and it was a Souls-like. Now, I've never managed to beat a Souls-like game before, and I thought that maybe this could be the one that I finally completed. Maybe it would be my entry point into that type of game, and I go on to play a lot more Souls-likes from there. This game runs pretty nicely on Steam Deck. Most of the time you're averaging between 30 and 40 frames per second. The graphics style means that it doesn't need loads of power to run. It's this mix of realism and cartoony-like graphics. I think it works well, and like I said, it runs nicely with a good couple hours of battery life. The gameplay itself is a lot of fun, especially if you're into these types of games. It's got that sort of classic Souls-like gameplay, but at the same time you're a crab whose shell has been stolen by a loan shark on an adventure to try and get it back, and so along the way you're picking up whatever you can find to use as a shell, and this opens up extra specific mechanics for you. Each shell has a special ability linked to it, and there are quite a lot of different ones giving you a twist to your gameplay. Some of them are sort of boosts, they speed up your movement speed, some of them shoot out projectiles, some of them launch you and your enemy up in the air. There's loads of variety there. Being a Souls-like, there's lots of tough bosses, secrets to discover in each area, shortcuts to unlock. There's also some abilities and upgrades that are slightly different to something like Dark Souls, but I think it fits in really well with this game. There's loads of charm here, and I do think that the humour is funny. Lots of sea puns, and many of the environments, shells and weapons are made up from trash that would be discarded by humans and sink to the bottom of the ocean, so it's got a little bit of a deeper message to it as well. Now sadly this wasn't the first Souls-like game that I beat. I'd love to say that I powered through it, but in the end I really struggled with some of the bosses and getting lost in one of the zones. I couldn't beat this, but if you do like Souls-like games then I don't think you'll have the same trouble I did, and so just because I'm a bit rubbish at this genre, that doesn't stop me from recommending another Crab's Treasure as a great game to play on Steam Deck. The second game that I'm suggesting on this list is Dinkum. Now, honestly this game was not really on my radar to start with, but my wife really wanted to play it, so we both got a copy, and a lot of our playtime has been on Steam Deck. If you don't know Dinkum, it's a cozy style game set in Australia. You've moved away from the big city and you're starting your own town out in the wilderness. That might sound a bit like Stardew Valley, but in this case you really are starting from scratch. At first there's barely anyone on the island, and it's only as you build things up that people come to visit, and then they settle down and they bring shops. Those open up lots of different areas in the game. There are so many different licenses that you can unlock. There's ones you'd expect in these types of games like mining, farming, fishing, but then there's lots of unusual ones too that I haven't seen anywhere else, so things like brewing and metal detecting, and then there's a vehicle handling one that unlocks land, sea and air vehicles. Now we've both played a lot of this game solo, but we've also spent a lot of time together visiting each other's islands to sort of run around together, hunt down alpha creatures or help with a project that the other one is working on. We also had fun giving each other silly gifts, so I probably spent half my playtime with googly eyes because they were a gift from her, and of course that meant that I couldn't take them off. My wife definitely likes this type of game more than me, but the combat in Dinkum is a little bit more fleshed out than in other types of games like this. The alpha creatures that I mentioned before, they are bosses that have an extra level of danger, so for me that is a little extra bonus to keep me interested than you often get in a lot of these types of games. Dinkum runs nicely on Steam Deck. Before this I've been playing a lot of these bigger games from a few years ago, so then when I was switching to this I was nicely surprised by the battery life. You get 3 maybe 4 hours to play. The frame rate can vary, sometimes you're at 40 and sometimes 60, but it doesn't often dip below 40, and if the variation bothers you then you can sort of lock that down with the Steam Deck profiles. It's still in early access, so there's plenty more content coming, but just to give you an idea of the time played, you can easily put 60, 70, maybe even closer to 100 hours in, even in these early stages. There's lots of games in this category these days, but if you're a fan of these and you haven't tried it yet, then I think Dinkum is a great shout to play on Steam Deck. On to game number 3 then. Now, I really enjoyed playing Dinkum, but sometimes I have difficulty continuing to play a game once the missions run out, and the game just sort of leaves you to make your own objectives and decide whatever it is that you want to do. But I still wanted to get that fix from a game where you're sort of building up a base of some kind, collecting resources and slowly upgrading as you go, and so that made me think of Dragon Quest Builders 2, and I tried it out on Steam Deck. This game is actually listed as unsupported on Steam Deck, but I will tell you that my entire playtime of this game so far is on Steam Deck. I've never played it on PC. The actual game runs fine, but when you launch the game, it does first ask you if you want to play the game or launch the configuration options, and I could never get the configuration options to open, so I think that that might be why this game is listed as unsupported. Luckily, if in those options you pick the game to run, it loads fine and you can still change things like graphic settings from there. Because the blocky, stylized nature of this game, it looks fine to run on low, and this means that a lot of the time you can get 60 FPS, unless there's a lot going on screen at once. It does dip down a little bit then, but most of the time you're at 60, and so it really does make for a good time on Steam Deck. Being a Dragon Quest fan, I got hooked pretty quickly on this game, and there's plenty of quests and stories to follow, and there's just so many buildings to create if you love that kind of thing. And for me, the really great thing about Dragon Quest Builders 2 is that the missions often direct you to build things that you maybe wouldn't think about or you wouldn't know how to build, which end up looking amazing by the time you've finished a chain of quests. You do things like sculpt out the environment to create rivers, you build houses, restaurants, forests, farms, mines. If I was just left to my own devices, I'd probably get choice paralysis and end up barely building anything, or maybe I'd have a cool idea but have no idea how to build it, and so I'd give up partway through. But this way I have a great time building something that does then look amazing by the time you're finished. The main story lasts a little over 50 hours, but after that there's so many extra things to do. There's a whole huge list of like rooms that you can go through and try and get one of each one on your island. And of course, if you just want to build, then you can really just build to your heart's content. So in that sense, the playtime is potentially limitless. I would love it if we get Dragon Quest Builders 3 at some point, and I really recommend number 2 on the Steam Deck. Next up is Diablo 4. Now, I actually already made a video on Diablo 4 and whether it was any good on Steam Deck or not, but the reason I'm including it in this video is because it's been a whole year since I made that video, and in that time Diablo 4 has had a whole bunch of updates and different seasons. I own the game through battle.net and have to go through a slightly more awkward installation process, but the game is now available to buy on Steam. It does still launch battle.net, but it's much easier to set up and play this way. The game is having a bit of a resurgence at this point. It's in its 4th season, and so Blizzard have received a lot of feedback and they've poured that into some of these updates. And the general consensus now is that the game is much improved from when it was originally released. Season 4 has brought a huge overhaul to itemization, and in fact the game has just broken the record for concurrent player count on Steam when I'm recording this, and that doesn't even count players on Xbox or those playing directly through battle.net. So it's very popular right now and you will have plenty of people to play with. I've been diving back in over the last couple of weeks running a seasonal character, and I actually also think that the performance is better now than when I did my first video. Without any kind of FSR running, you can get the same kind of frame rates as a year ago when you had FSR running, if not higher. And you're getting a good 2 to 3 hours of battery life now, which is plenty of time to take down some demons and hunt for some loot. The game was made with controller support right from release, so playing on Steam Deck works completely fine. If you liked any of the ARPGs like these, then I think there's a lot to like here. And you know, even if you think that the game is expensive full price now, then the good thing about a game like Diablo is that it will be supported with new updates and seasons for a really long time. And even if you've just been dipping in and out for the seasons that sound interesting to you, that's what I've been doing, I still think you get plenty of value out of your money for a game like this. Recently there's been an expansion announced coming out in October, and it will bring a brand new class and additional content. So now might be a great time to jump in and play through the campaign ready for a new expansion. There's something about ID Software and the modern Doom games. I don't really know what wizardry they work over there, but these games are so incredibly fine-tuned, polished and optimized, and that they feel unreal to play. Doom was one of the early games that had a miracle port on the Nintendo Switch, and they even got Doom Eternal running on that underpowered handheld, so it makes sense that Eternal would run great on Steam Deck, right? 100% correct. Out of the box you can hit 60 and above frames, and look, we've hit 60 frames on the Steam Deck with plenty of games on this channel, but a lot of them are platformers, or they're slower paced games, or maybe they are games that are stylized, where the graphics, they still look great, don't get me wrong, but they clearly don't need a lot of power. So when Doom Eternal looks this good, moves this quickly and smoothly, it really feels like a technical achievement getting 60 FPS on the Steam Deck. And in fact, you can even enable ray tracing on this game if you want to make that lighting look even more gorgeous. Although be warned, this does impact the frame rate by quite a large amount. It feels more like you'd have to lock it at 30 instead of 60, but I prefer to play at 60 frames since this game is just so fast, and so I'll sacrifice that ray tracing, but the option is there for you if you would much prefer that. I've been playing a little bit at a time here and there between other games. I really liked Doom 2016 and so far I'm enjoying this one just as much. I don't play a lot of shooters on the Steam Deck, never mind first person view ones. I often feel like I don't have full control over the movement, but I'm loving Doom Eternal and the fast paced gameplay hasn't felt like it's too much. It's an incredibly slick shooter, but on top of that, there's also a lot to collect and there's loads of unlocks as you make your way through the campaign. There's a bunch of DLC too if you really get into it, and in that same announcement as Diablo 4's expansion, we also got our first look at a new Doom game, which looks amazing. If you've not played any of the modern Doom games yet, I would start with 2016, but then be sure to move on to Eternal for even more Slayer action. Plus, both of these games have an awesome soundtrack to go along with them. So there we go, those were 5 amazing games that I think are worth picking up on Steam Deck episode 4. Hopefully you found it useful, maybe there was a game or two that you've decided to pick up now, or maybe there was some you're already playing. Let me know down in the comments, and if there are any games that you think should make it onto these lists, let me know so that I can check them out and maybe they'll make it into the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.